do anything else, I want to thank our sponsors for tonight. Oh, actually, first, I want to let everybody know WHF-PA, we do like to record these sessions and make them available for future use. So if anyone's uncomfortable with us recording, please feel free to turn off your camera or change your name, or if you must, drop off. But we hope everybody's comfortable. It's only shared, I think, within our membership. I don't think it's even publicly available. But
No.
Okay. And let me thank also our sponsors. So Community Basics is a sponsor, HDC Mid-Atlantic is a sponsor, and the law firm of Nicholas and Hohenadel. I hope I'm saying that right. So thank you to our sponsors for supporting us to do this stuff. And without further ado, I want to just dive right into this fantastic presentation that we're going to have tonight. So our guest speaker today is Lisa McGovern, joining us from Cleveland Housing Network, CHN, in Cleveland, specifically to talk about their lease purchase program, which was a program I had heard about in my work a few years ago with a client who was interested in sort of, can you make LIHTC work for homeownership? I started my career in homeownership stuff, and CLT world last month was very close to home, as you know. And CHN, I think, has done some really, really impressive work on LIHTC lease purchase. So we're very excited to have Lisa join us and really talk to us about their program and their work in Pennsylvania, increasingly in Pennsylvania, which is awesome. So Lisa has 20 years of experience in affordable housing development. She's worked at CDCs and other nonprofits in a number of cities, on both affordable and commercial. Before joining CHN, she worked at KeyBank in lending on both construction and perm loans in affordable and other types of projects throughout the country. At CHN, she's their Director of Real Estate Development. She oversees a 12-person team on project management and construction staff, working on affordable housing in all the markets that CHN serves, which I'm sure she will tell you about all those places. It is not just Cleveland. She serves on the board of directors for Detroit Shoreway CDO, and she holds a bachelor's degree in urban planning and a master's degree in urban studies from Cleveland State University. Thank you so much, Lisa McGovern. I will turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Elaine, and thanks for the introduction. So I'm going to hope that my technology is not the biggest problem today. Can you guys see a PowerPoint? Okay, that's good. So thanks for inviting me to speak. My boss, Mark Whipke, was the one who was previously on the slides who was going to speak. And at some point it dawned on him that, hey, there is a woman in housing and finance who works for him. So I was happy to be asked to do it. I will also introduce Michelle Porter, my colleague at CHN, is on the call. So she'll, at some point I may refer to her, just so you know. So CHN, I'm here really to talk about the single family lease purchase model. CHN is an organization, we were actually formerly known as Cleveland Housing Network. And as we've reached out to work in other markets, we realized that not everybody's excited about Cleveland. And so we rebranded a couple years ago to be called CHN Housing Partners. Although I find that more and more when I'm in other places, people say, hey, you're that group from Cleveland. And it's like, we may as well just own that. So yes, we are now officially CHN Housing Partners. But we're a 40-year-old nonprofit organization that was really founded out of the community development corporations in the city of Cleveland, who were doing lots of community organizing type functions, but realized that to really change the face of neighborhoods, a homeownership and affordable housing initiative was needed. And so in 1981, those groups got together. Our board of directors still has representatives from the CDCs in Cleveland. So we really work in partnership with neighborhood groups and communities that we're in. I like this power of a permanent address as a way to help you kind of understand what the organization does. And I'll kind of go into the different tasks that we think change, help people to maintain stable housing, but that's really what our organizing principle is people need a permanent address. As I said, we often partner with community groups. A lot of our deals are done with nonprofits, government, public housing authorities, other organizations. We are headquartered in Cleveland, but we have operations in Detroit and in Western Pennsylvania and Western New York. So just to get an idea of the scale of the organization, we're roughly a 200-person organization, including property staff. And we serve about 40,000 unduplicated people a year, and in Detroit and in Cleveland, and soon to be in Pittsburgh and Rochester. We've developed about 6,500 homes over those 40 years, almost all through the tax credit program. So this slide is really kind of helping you understand, Michelle and I are in the real estate development group, but really the organization does a variety of different tasks, from utility bill pay assistance to weatherization to help people's utility bills be affordable for them so that they can stay in their homes. Doing community building and engagement with kind of creating internship programs and partnerships for the youth who live in some of our housing. Counseling and education, which is a big focus of the lease purchase program, as is home lending. So I'll talk more about those. And since this is a small group, if you guys have questions as we're going, I'm happy to be interrupted, but I'll just keep going. So the lease purchase program really was kind of the founding effort of CHN. We started doing it before the tax credit program was created, and adapted our model to fit into the squirrely world of the IRS, which I'm sure most of you know is painful. But really, this was a way to create affordable home ownership for families who are low income, and really focusing on residents who are kind of in the 40 to 60% AMI bucket. It is, because it's tax credit funded, it's a 15-year rental program, after which residents are able to purchase their home. And I'll talk about kind of how we build up to their purchase. CHN does, we have a GC, I oversee a general contractor who does our own single family construction in Cleveland. We are the owner, developer, property manager, and contractor on our Cleveland deals. We also do sales, and now are a lender to our residents. But we can talk a bit. We partner with other people, like in Detroit, we're just doing property management for lease purchase, and in Rochester, we were a consulting developer to someone who wanted to do a lease purchase development. So we've done about 2,200 single family scattered site lease purchase, and we've sold over, I think it's actually 1,400 now, to lease purchase residents. And that lag is because some of those homes are still in the 15-year compliance period, but really the vast majority of the homes are sold to residents. I'll talk a little more about that later. But I mean, basically 85 to 90% of our lease purchase families take title to their homes. Generally, the remainder of the homes that residents don't purchase are purchased by income qualified new residents. So really they are benefiting families who have low incomes. Of the families who have purchased our homes, 99% of them have been successful in maintaining their home ownership for at least 5 years, which that to me is really the crux of the success of the program. So, the kind of fundamental principles of this program are that it's home ownership. I mean, the first thing is when residents take, get their keys to the house, we talk to residents about home ownership opportunities. They sign a contract of care where they shovel their walkways, they take out their trash, they change their furnace filter. We do all of the maintenance and kind of property management things, but the things that, those of us who are homeowners do, we work with our residents to learn how to do, because eventually they'll be doing it. We do that through classes, counseling, a lot of different touches, and I'll talk more about kind of who does that internally. But so really it's focusing on home ownership as the goal. The other thing is structuring the deal and renting to people who we call this the equivalency principle, where you are assuming that a person who's been able to pay a set amount in rent is going to be able, if they've been successful doing that for 2 to 3 years, they'll be successful paying that same amount towards home ownership. And so from structuring it up front, we want to make sure that the sales price at the back end is going to be low enough that somebody who's paying $700 a month will be able to keep paying $700 a month and that mortgage that they end up with is paid off in 5 years or less. So it is really being intentional at the financing to make sure you're not loading these projects up with a lot of debt that the residents then essentially, have to finish paying off what hasn't already amortized. The other part is really recognizing that people who are at 60% AMI are still probably going to need some assistance, and there are resources available to them for financial assistance. So it's reaching out and doing any of the IDA or match savings or down payment assistance programs that are available. And so we work a lot to establish like what's out there and get our residents connected. And then this fourth part is something that wasn't a barrier until 2008 when the world fell apart. Before then, our residents were really getting mortgages on the traditional market. And as soon as the financial crisis hit and lending requirements changed, that kind of same buyer was no longer able to get mortgages on the open market. And so we had to scramble, and for a short time we're doing on balance sheet lending by the organization for short, 3 to 5 year terms. But we recently created a CDFI and are doing mortgages through that. So I talked a little bit about the capital structure and kind of that equivalency principle. And I do have a sources and uses in here later, so you can kind of just see what that looks like. But the vast majority of the capital stack on these deals is tax credit equity and then minimal soft sources. And we really try and keep the must pay bank debt at about $10,000 per unit. There are times where we're forced to go higher. It just kind of puts pressure on the back end in terms of what we're able to sell the properties. And I'm sure you're kind of thinking $10,000, what's the sales price? Our average sales price right now is about $25,000. The other part, is for those soft sources, as you can imagine, kind of dealing with home funds or other pass-through dollars where you're selling these homes, you need to structure the agreement with those providers up front to make sure that they understand that the whole goal of this program is to sell the home to a resident. And that resident will be qualified on the day that they move in, but we need them to release whatever mortgages they hold on those properties. And that really is the same with the HFA as well. This operations and maintenance is something that we've seen in working with other developers, that the scattered site nature of this program is different than multifamily. That kind of building up the systems around, just doing maintenance at 30 single family homes spread throughout a neighborhood is different than being in a multifamily building. So just making sure that you're getting into scattered site with these deals. The other thing is our property management and asset management team is really conscious of using cash flow to make capital improvements during the 15-year period. The idea is at the back end, you're not spending a whole bunch more money, but that you've also made sure that when a resident takes over, they're getting a home that the furnace is in good shape and it's still got 15 more years on the roof or all of those things that can be very expensive for people. At the same time, we actually really try not to touch reserves at all, using those to pay off whatever debt we can and handle major capital issues at the back end. So, generally on our portfolio, we are not drawing down reserves. We're just using cash to put it back into the deals. And then, the major thing in terms of getting residents ready is having the operations to meet regularly with residents throughout the whole 15 years, but really much more intensely in the last 5 years before they purchase. And so we set our lease terms in those last 5 years to be 6-month leases, so that residents are coming in and meeting with the financial counselors who are helping them deal with derogatory debt or helping make sure that their match savings is going well, or if they're looking for a new job or any of those kind of things, just to support them. Then the other thing, and this is kind of unique, I think, to lease purchase, we really have worked with the Ohio Housing Finance Agency to help them understand that these deals don't benefit from doing deep rent skewing for a portion of the residents. And it's really kind of a 30% AMI family is going to have a much harder time with a home ownership opportunity. And so we really try and focus on a certain segment of the population that we think will be able to be successful in the home long term, which we limit our AMI to 60%. I think our average tenant income is closer to 47% AMI. And then I talked a bit about this lending structure. We had this $500,000 revolving fund on our balance sheet, and we had very few delinquencies or issues, mostly because we're talking to these people all the time just to make sure that they're staying up on their mortgages. I think I talked about the equivalency principle. We don't utilize credit scores. Our underwriting is really focused on this idea that if a resident has been successful paying their rent, that they will be successful using that same amount of money and continuing to pay it. We do report tenant rents to the credit bureaus and trying to help residents to build up their credit throughout this period too. So this is kind of showing like the wraparound services. When I'm talking about, residents coming in and meeting with staff, we have people who are kind of homeownership counseling people, but then also people who just are able to connect to resources in the community in terms of job placement and training. I talked about, we run an internship program that was really designed to try and help youth in our housing to have opportunity. We're part of an earned income tax credit coalition, so it's just trying to keep money in people's pockets. And then, whatever else we can do in terms of the actual housing, even after they purchase, like if they have repairs or energy reduction issues, we can come back and help with furnaces and things. So it really, on the side of kind of helping residents figure out what they need to purchase these, it is a whole bunch of different things that we try and put together to make sure that this program works at the back end. And I think, it takes a whole team of salespeople who are really focused on bringing together resources, helping people access them, and then transacting the sales there. And I think I mentioned post-purchase, we're happy to kind of work with residents if they need it. So one of the things that I get asked when we're outside of Cleveland is like, would this work where I am? And I also know that there are other lease purchase models that have been done elsewhere. And we often run into communities where they're like, well, how is yours different than this? And I don't know exactly what other people, I try never to speak to what other people have done, but what I can say, things that have made this program successful in Cleveland, and I think in Rochester, New York as well, are number one, making sure that your housing finance agency is on board for this. This is not a way to lock in long-term affordability in a community. This is a way to create wealth building for individuals. And they have to know that in year 16, the goal is to sell this. We don't want a 30-year restrictive covenant. All of these things that are kind of typical in how we all want to see affordability locked in just don't apply as well to this program. And I should have said, we do this. We have permanent supportive housing. We have senior housing. So we do kind of a whole bunch of different things. In terms of actually being able to put a deal together, unfortunately, many of our communities have lots of vacant land because of demolition and abandonment. And so we have, for the last 5 years at least, been able to get land primarily from the land bank. And I'm pretty sure, and Michelle, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in Rochester, it was also land that was purchased from the land bank or from public.
From the city of Rochester.
From the city, okay, thanks. And in terms of Ohio, and it worked this way in Rochester as well, like 30 to 40 properties works well. And I think it depends on what your soft sources are and what your credit max is. You're going to have a development side sweet spot. This is just what's worked in the last couple of QAPs that we've done. And in terms of like having a critical mass on the operating side, for sure, 30 units we get yelled at by property management, but it's like, that's kind of what we can do on the development side. So the other thing, and I think, seeing this long list of like all the stuff we do, which what Michelle and I do on the development side is like this much of the model. It's the easy side of getting the buildings built, and really the effort is on the sales and support side. So it is making sure that you have a sponsor that is really focused on this and has a plan to transact it, whether they're going to do it themselves or if they have partners that they can rely on. And that in our case, the project does not pay for any of that. So really we are paying for any, and we basically fundraise for most of the work that we do on the, counseling and family support side. So that's important just for people to realize that generally these projects, don't throw off a ton of cash to be able to support all of this extra work that it takes. And then I talked about the scattered site, just the single family nature. It does help just to have some experience doing that. And then kind of the complications with home dollars. This has been different in different markets. And the work we're doing in Detroit is for some existing lease purchase deals that they're just trying to sell them to residents. They've already come out of year 15, and we're spending a ton of time with the city trying to help them unravel their home funds. And you realize, we have learned, you have to really understand with your home consortium, whoever your funder is, how they're going to apply the mortgage and the restrictions. Cleveland's basically limited their funds to 4 out of 30 houses. And so we've generally had someone who's still at 60% AMI in year 16 who qualifies under the home requirements. But it's a challenge, and you just have to figure this out up front. So this is more like the numbers and what they look like. These are the last 5 deals that we've done. The one on the far right, Detroit Shoreway Homes, we are closing this September. So all of these deals are in Cleveland. We've been fortunate that the QAP in Ohio still has a pool for a single family. So, there are 30 houses roughly, take a year to build. We do them in phases where we're rolling them out, kind of 5 to 7 units in a phase. I'm glad this group probably knows enough about LIHTC to see those bloated TDCs per unit. We have the 6-month operating reserves, all of the transaction costs in the LIHTC deal. And our hard costs have been relatively stable. This year has been a bear with, I'm sure everybody's feeling the same stuff, but lumber increases and all of that. But our homes are being built to enterprise green community standards. So we focus on the things that are maintenance, that are longevity items that reduce maintenance costs. So we're doing, we are doing vinyl siding, we're doing high efficiency furnaces though, and we're doing a 20-year roof, and we're doing LVT on the first floor instead of some other kind of vinyl tile. So this, if you can see it, if it's not too small on your screen, this is really like what our budget looks like on these deals. It's minimal acquisition. We save a lot of money on architecture and engineering because we're kind of doing the same deals over and over again with slight modifications. And as you can see on this deal, this is 30 units, and we only have $310,000 in perm loan debt. And that City of Cleveland home funds, that's kind of their typical for a tax credit deal. But the primary source is equity. And we've typically worked with Enterprise and KeyBank on these deals in the recent history. So this really, I talked about, it's 60% AMI. These are 3-bedroom, 2-bath. That square foot is messed up because OFA makes us include the basement and the garage in the square footage. So really they're 1,300 square feet houses, and we're renting them for just under $700 a month right now, which is well below the tax credit max, but Cleveland, and I'm sure other markets, the max LIHTC rent is way above market in a lot of neighborhoods. This you probably can't read at all, but this is our 15-year cash flow. And really, it's no different than, we need to hit a 110 in year 15. The biggest thing that we've learned on these deals, our property management team has such a demand for these homes that even though we're having to use AHIC standards for 7% vacancy, our entire portfolio, the vacancy rate is below 2%, and that includes our Detroit units. And so when I talked about kind of being able to put cash flow back into the deal, that's really where that happens, because we're just keeping them occupied. This is what they look like. And Cleveland's lots are 40 by 120 lots. We're building in old neighborhoods that have a hodgepodge of houses. And we're always trying to fit into kind of the community context. And this home seems to work in many of the neighborhoods. You can see it's like we are able to do some nice things like add in the shake gables, and we have beefed up front porches, those kind of things, but it is a relatively basic home. We have one different model, but there's some neighborhoods that there's less front porches, so we're trying to be responsive to that. And then this one shows the house on the right is our ADA home. So it's still a 3-bedroom, 2-bath accessible home. And this is homes that this picture was last month, and these things are already being drywalled. It's crazy. They go up really fast once they go up. So we have our first units and our last development are coming online next month in March, and we kind of just roll from one deal to another as much as we can to just keep everybody moving. So that's what I had for my slideshow.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we totally want to sort of throw this open for questions. I'll kick us off with one or two, but please, don't be shy. Everyone, please feel free to jump in. I think probably you talked a little bit about sort of the relationship that you have with OFA, and that you had syndicators and investors that tend to be the ones you go with. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit, I know Mark had a lot to explain about kind of how do you bring your capital partners along to kind of understand this? Is this something where you go into Western Pennsylvania and yeah, we can explain this to PHFA, no problem? Or is it like a really long education process, both with allocators and maybe capital providers as well?
It's been interesting. I would say the HFA that's the one we start with because it's so fundamental. The tax credits are essential, and so many of the restrictions come from them. And so like in New York, for instance, Michelle just closed that deal in Rochester in December. And I think we were going to New York at the request of HCR for probably a year, just meeting with them and doing like this slideshow, but then I would bring the salespeople to kind of talk about, what's it like from their perspective and really do a lot of the background work. So that part is probably the most essential. The syndicators and investors, a lot of them either are into scattered site or not. I feel like that's more the defining factor than the lease purchase part of it. We just RFP'd equity for our most recent deal. And, we really only work with like 4 investors, and 2 of them just said we're not doing scattered site right now. So Enterprise has been great, and they know our model really, really well. And because they're so focused on kind of the holistic, the resident, really, they've been a great partner in understanding this.
And since we have a Pennsylvania audience, as much as you feel comfortable sharing, is your sense that PHFA totally gets it and they're ready to do more of these, or are you still in kind of an education phase with PHFA?
It's funny. So we actually got our first award in Pennsylvania working with the Hill CDC in Pittsburgh, and it's for a workforce mixed use building. We had initially, Hill asked to talk to us about lease purchase initially. They were a lot of people really loved this program, and it's like, how do you do home ownership? And they just happened to have this other deal, so we kind of moved over to that. I don't know, Michelle, do you have a sense? I personally haven't been in any conversations directly with PHFA about lease purchase, and there's nobody from PHFA on this call, right?
Well, I was actually surprised to learn that PHFA has actually funded a scattered site lease purchase deals in Pittsburgh. There are 3. Bloomfield, Garfield, actually Bloomfield maybe 4, because Bloomfield, Garfield may have 3 on its own, and Trek Development has 1. And the reason that I was surprised was because I actually happened to be at the meeting where CHM presented to the Hill CDC about the lease purchase program. I wasn't working for them at the time, and I thought, oh wow, this is a great concept. And my first thought was always, how will PHFA perceive it? Because it was always my understanding that they discourage scattered site developments. And so to learn that there are projects that have been funded, a couple of them were probably 5 or 6 years away from the year 16 conversion. So I'm encouraged that, you know, PHFA is willing to take a chance to fund these type of deals. But I don't think we've spoken directly with PHFA as an organization. CHN hasn't, I don't think.
It's good to know there's a precedent, though. It sounds like somebody's been doing it, or at least did at one point. So that's really good to know. I want to throw any other questions that people have. The only other one that I had was just, it sounds like every one that you're talking about, these tend to be new construction. Does this model work, or have you ever tried it as a rehab?
Yeah, so initially this used to be more rehabs. And it's harder, especially because, you know, this is based on kind of being able to do 30 homes in a year, and rehabs are just harder to do from a construction standpoint and more unpredictable. And we've had the luxury of having vacant sites. So the city of Cleveland has been really focused on filling in the missing teeth. I'm sure we're going to go back to doing the rehabs. And in fact, you know, there's a lot of neighborhoods where it really makes sense. And I hope we're done just tearing down houses for, you know, to get the land moving. So I'm sure we will be back to it. The lead work in Cleveland, and I'm sure lots of older cities, is a huge barrier. And actually, I mean, just the environmental, Michelle, what's the number in Rochester for the site? It's like 20 grand a site just to bring in new dirt.
Yes.
And that's new construction. So, I mean, but the ones in Cleveland, the lead abatement, lead and asbestos were big numbers.
I had a couple of questions. This is Vidhi, if I may. And okay, great. This was a great presentation, Lisa. Like, it just really everything, you know, we work with tax credits, but all on the rental side. So it was really good to know how you use them. So I might be asking things that you've already covered, and because I have ADD, probably I didn't hear, or because maybe you haven't covered. But
because it's happy hour. Yeah, go ahead.
I know, where is the booze? Penny, what's going on? So Lisa, like, what you said you use tax credits. So my first question was, like, you don't apply for the rental tax credit program. You just apply for the home. Is there a home separate? No,
this is actually, it's through the 9% round. It's just through the straight 9% round.
And so in Ohio, do they have a separate scoring criteria or for home ownership deals? Because I don't think that exists in Pennsylvania unless like.
Yeah. You're right. So that is one of the fundamental, in Ohio, it's taken a long time, like the QAP really, it is very helpful to have a separate pool where these things don't compete against multifamily, because those are going to be more cost effective. Yeah. So you saw those numbers, like they're very expensive. And so OFA over the years, they're just committed to this idea of using this tool for home ownership. And so they've made that commitment. I do think, you know, New York seems to be, and I think I heard Blanca maybe was from New York, that I think they funded this because they were really just interested in the model. I don't know, and New York doesn't seem to be as scoring focused as other states. Yeah. But you're right, that is one of the big things, is like both educating, but then also getting a commitment to like focus on, to giving these deals a chance.
Yeah, and I think, Michelle, you had mentioned that Trek may have had a project already and a couple are already there in Pittsburgh. So I was just curious because I'm just wondering how they financed it through PHFA, if it's a competitive process through 9% round. Like I think I might reach out to somebody at Trek unless you guys know how they actually funded it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure that both Bloomfield, Garfield, and Track financed it through 9% rounds. Because I remember when I talked to Rick Schwartz, he was saying, it took, going back and forth with PHFA just so that they could understand what they were trying to do. But it was definitely as a matter of fact, the last 9% round that was awarded, Bloomfield, Garfield received a lease purchase award in that 9%. So
Wow, that's amazing.
Mhm.
And then I just had another follow-up question. So when you get these awards, like, do you have a sense of where your tenants / future homeowners, like, do you have some sense of how you're going to fill them? Is there a wait list? Do you have within your organization? Because how do you know, like, intellectually, we all know there's a huge need for this, but how do you address that?
Our experience has been like, we have 5 units that are coming online next month, and our CDC partner did outreach in their newsletter and put a sign in the window, and we have 450 people on an interest list so it doesn't mean all of them qualify, but we actually just have not had an issue filling units.
And so how early, where in the process do you start working with the future residents to qualify them to make sure that they are eligible? Because this commitment is more than just, a year-to-year rental. Like, how do you?
I think, they do from, the initial lease up, they really talk about it as we are working with you so that you can purchase this home. And our hope, they talk about the whole 15-year process and what kind of assistance would be provided. And they work to create a budget, like they're required to do financial counseling and to come up with what their goals are for their finances in the pursuit of becoming a homeowner. So it's both in the documentation. I think I mentioned the contract of care, which kind of it's different than just a lease. It's something that they're signing, saying like, we understand that we have more requirements than we might typically. And then also making sure that right away they're getting the kind of expectation and assistance that the services side provides to help them be home buyers. Not everybody, I should say, 85% of residents who are there in year 15 purchase the home. It doesn't mean that every resident has been there for 15 years. And I think what we've kind of seen is that like a third of the people are there for the whole 15 years. A third of the people are there for 5 to 8 years. And a third of the people are there for 1 to 5 years. So it's not every single person who starts on day one goes all the way through. And we do occasionally have people who don't purchase for whatever, they don't want to own a home in the neighborhood they've lived in, or, for personal reasons. It does happen.
And what happens, Lisa, to those people? Do they stay as renters, or do they have to move somewhere else?
We have a separate fund. So in year 15, when the investor has exited, we hold those. If there's someone there, like someone who has a Section 8 certificate, or we will hold those in a rent fund and just rent them until that person either wants to buy or leave.
And Lisa, this is Angela. Thanks for your presentation. This is it was really interesting. And to clarify, is anyone who's in the home at year 15, regardless of how many years they've lived there, they're eligible to purchase?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And for tax credits, it's like that person, home funding aside, the tax credit, they only have to qualify when they move in. And so we have had people who have raised their income and will be at 80% AMI or something. We also have had people, in neighborhoods that have risen in value, who've sold the home that they bought through lease purchase years later and, built a lot of equity and done something different with it. Kind of just like any of us would if we,
Yeah, I wanted to flag that because I remember that being a really interesting point when I was talking to Mark, that this kind of came up a little bit last month. Our group was talking about community land trust. I think what's really interesting about your model is that you've got this very clear kind of policy position or principle where you sort of say, this is not about, you said it exactly right. The extended use is not what we're going for here. We're not going for permanent affordability. if there's a homeowner who comes in and is low income and they are able to sort of do well and make money off this property in the long haul, great. That is absolutely a decision that you've made. And I'm curious if that was ever, like, have you ever had pushback from OFA or anybody else, or everybody really gets this?
You know, I think it's definitely something I'm real upfront about at first, because to your point, like, there are just different people have different purposes. And a lot of times when I go to talk to CDCs, they're interested in locking in affordability for the neighborhood. And so that's where land trust makes a lot more sense if that's the approach. It's just, I'm not saying this is the only tool and that every resident is right for a lease purchase home. And that's why we do a whole bunch of other affordable housing. But this is really an equity building tool.
I don't want to crowd out other people. Please don't be shy with your questions. But one thing I wanted to flag as well. So as we're sort of talking about, maybe PHFA doesn't have a special pot for these. Have you ever been able to make these work on a 4%?
So we did do a 4% mostly rehab deal. That was when NSP, the city had a ton of NSP money, and they were like, "We'll give you $4 million. Go do a 4% deal." So generally, at least in the markets that we've done deals in, and kind of the resident base, so we haven't been able to do deals that are like 4% and debt. You really have to have some kind of capital grant source. So maybe they'll come out with another NSP soon. We can do that.
What is, Lisa, what is the typical cycle? So do you tend to put one or more applications in, and how often are you used to kind of getting an award given the special component? And then, so how does, what is like sort of the life cycle of the organization like with projects? How successful, like, do you tend to get one award a year, or there's some years where you don't get any? And how does that work?
It's a great question. And it's actually part of what has evolved at the organization. So I kind of talked about, for the first 25 years, I'd say, pretty much all CHN really focused on single family. And, the early deals, they were much bigger. So, I think there weren't as many requirements around reserves and the depth of rehab and things. So deals were cheaper and we did more units, and probably not as well in hindsight. And so at some point, though, we realized deal sizes were getting smaller. And so you can't really sustain an organization on kind of these deals that are shrinking, and that there's just greater competition. And so you're getting like 50 units a year done. And so the organization really made an intentional look at, like, what do we do well? We do kind of these wraparound services. So what other population should we be thinking about? And that's where we really branched. We went from lease purchase to permanent supportive housing, which is maybe a little bit of a jump, but we just finished our 13th building and have technically ended chronic homelessness in Cuyahoga County with that building coming online. But that was really, it was both like, how do we sustain an organization? Because there's fewer, we're not going to get 3 lease purchase deals a year. We're going to get 1. And it's going to be smaller because they're just not funding that many units. So our GC, like, we just have to figure out how to stretch these resources and to use what we do well with other populations. So really, we just submitted in Ohio, we did 1 9% deal. And chances are there's not a ton of competition, and OFA really has kept that pool pretty tight in terms of making sure that the organizations who get funded with lease purchase have been able to actually transact on the back end. So they haven't really opened the pool up to like new people coming in to do it. You have to have somebody involved who's experienced. Because as you can, you think about all these other staff people you have to have, this is a labor of love. It's not a money-making program.
Lisa, I have a question for you about how you guys think about maintenance. And you mentioned that you try and keep that payment the same during the lease period so it's sustainable afterwards. Yeah. And, someone with a house that's constantly broken, like that can really jump when you own the home and are now, have to take care of all that. How do you kind of think about that for the residents?
Yeah, and that's a good, so I should say I've only been on the property management side for 1 year, and I realize that's the other hardest job to do in this industry. So I can only speak to what I hear they do. I mean, there is all of the preventative maintenance and really helping. So the residents, they are cleaning their furnace, they're mowing their lawn, they're watering their lawn, they're shoveling their sidewalk. But if the sink breaks, we're fixing it. It's really, we do things like homeownership classes where a plumber will teach people how to do those things, but we still own them and need them to be good assets, and so we do maintain them. I think the point I would make about it is really just trying to keep the payment for it coming out of operations, and it's really all about that efficiency and vacancies, so that you have the cash flow to be able to keep the properties up. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, and I guess I'm thinking about once they own, if there's like a
Oh.
huge jump, like now they don't have to fix the roof. They don't have to, I mean, now it's on them to fix the roof or unclog the plumbing, and that could be a huge,
Yeah.
financial burden.
Yeah.
How you think about that?
It's true. And one of the things we have done is at closing of these deals, we capitalized $2,500 per unit for a transition reserve, so that there is some money set aside and capitalized at day one for an inspector to come through. And OFA and the city of Cleveland also have access to these reports for a third party to come in and say, listen, here's what really needs to be done to make sure this home doesn't cost a ton of money in the first 5 years. So we try and do all of that stuff that's, it's not cosmetic or wear and tear things. It's really like systems and the really expensive things. We don't have, I don't know how often we have residents post year 16 coming back and asking for rental or for help with paying for things. It's a good question. I don't know. Michelle, I don't know if you've heard anyone talk about that, but I really haven't.
No.
Yeah. The thing I have heard, which is interesting, is that like residents, we have a resident engagement council and people really like this program. But at the same time, in year 16, after they've been through a long time of meeting with people and having someone in their business, they're kind of like, we're done. Thank you. We'd like to just move on now. So I don't know, even though we offer things for post transfer, I'm not sure. And, especially because we're the lender in a lot of these instances, I don't know how much people come back and ask for more help.
I know we're almost at time, and I don't, if other people have questions, I want to make sure that they get them. If no one else does, if Lisa, you want to go quickly over just the mechanics of how that actually works at year 15, right? So if I'm remembering, it's sort of piece by piece, there's a forgivable note, and the loans that you do are not 30-year loans. They're sort of much shorter.
Yeah.
Again, if anyone else wants to jump in with a question, I'm happy to sort of retract that one. But if we have a minute to talk about the mechanics, then it might be helpful.
Sure. So it's really at the back end, and Mark Whipke, who would have been me talking, is the one who really unwinds these at the back end. And it's like the investor exits and we pay off the remaining mortgage. The units are transferred to CHN Housing Partners from the limited partnership. And we then sell from CHN Housing Partners to residents. The CDFI is a separate, it's CHN Housing Capital. And so a lot of our I would say the last month that I saw was like 8 out of 10 of the people who bought in January went through CHN Housing Capital. And the other 2 either had cash or used a traditional lender. We structured those loans really starting with the equivalency principle and saying like, you can only pay whatever your rent was, that's what we're going to set up this mortgage to be. But the goal is to try and keep the mortgage 3 to 5 years. 5 years would be long, but a fully amortizing 3 to 5 year loan.
Can I ask why not sort of say you get a 30-year loan like any other homeowner? Is it just they're sort of too small?
I guess probably servicing it would be a big pain in the butt for us if I think about it from their standpoint. I think they're trying to kind of say your money would be better spent on other things, and so you'll be done with your housing And especially, I mean, in markets, real estate taxes are going up a lot in a lot of places. And so you know, that takes a lot of people's incomes.
Definitely.
Water and sewer, yeah.
Yeah. Well, let me.
Well, I should say Michelle is in Pittsburgh, so she is
Oh,
local. And, you know, I can make sure and send out, I'm happy to share this deck if it's helpful. And if people have questions afterwards, Michelle's a great resource. And this is kind of her role, is like helping tell the stories. So, you know, we're happy to keep talking anytime.
that's fantastic. Well, please join us, Michelle. We are excited to learn about more women in housing finance in Pennsylvania. Does anyone else have any last questions? I don't want to take up the last bit of time if anyone wants that. Okay, you did an amazing job. You answered all the questions.
Thank you.
Okay, well,
thanks.
thank you so much for joining us, both of you. That's super
You're
great
welcome.
to know. And yeah, please, if people want to be in touch with Lisa and need contact info, you can certainly reach out to us through WHF-PA. But Penny, anything else, any housekeeping we need to do before we sign off?
No, I don't think so. But I just want to thank the new people that we haven't seen before for checking in with us, and hope you found this helpful. I certainly did. And Elaine and Jenny have been in charge of the last couple third Thursdays, and I don't know, you guys have set a high bar. I don't know how we're going to top this now that the pressure is on. So, but I will say, just wanted to open it up because the members are, you know, really, this is member run. You know, we're on the events committee, so we try to, you know, put our heads together once a month. We're always happy to have new people, new voices on there. And if anyone has a topic for a third Thursday, we're open to suggestions. So please do reach out, and we're here every third Thursday, barring now that we don't have snow days, we don't even have to cancel for those. But yeah, we took a month off around the holidays, but otherwise we've been pretty consistent over the last few months and hope to keep it that way. So please, you know, make a note on your calendar for the third Thursday, and we'll keep trying to come up with interesting topics and interesting people to hear from. And thank you guys for joining us. And thanks Elaine and Lisa and Michelle and Jenny for doing all this. Thanks a lot. Have a good rest of the night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.